occasionally they would get close to these things, and they were seeing these very bizarre objects. And the really shocking thing was that nobody was doing anything about it. It was unbelievable to me almost. I'm an intelligence professional. One of the things the intelligence community tries to do, is paid to do, is to ensure that we avoid a strategic surprise like Pearl Harbor. And in fact, during Pearl Harbor, in advance of the attack, there was a Navy lieutenant operating a radar who saw the approaching aircraft on the radar, and he failed to report it. In 9/11, in that tragic terrorist attack, many years later, in the aftermath, we found out that FBI and CIA had been sharing information. We might have been able to prevent that attack. And this activity had all the elements of those prior intelligence failures. And it was just shocking to me that because of this stigma, the entire system was paralyzed. So my first effort was I happened to know two individuals who were direct reports to General Mattis, who was then the Secretary of Defense, and I introduced them to Luis Elizondo, and we brought in some of the naval aviators to tell them firsthand what they were encountering. And unfortunately, the subject was still so hot, nobody wanted to touch it. Notwithstanding the fact that there was great potential risk to the country, not to mention the aviators. They were actually having, and I saw a video of a near mid-air collision where one of these things passed between two F-18 fighters, went right between them. And the fighter that recorded this video, the pilot was, realized he'd had a near-death experience, and he was, screaming into the microphone. So when it became clear that nothing was happening on this, I faced the choice between walking away from it or taking sort of extreme exceptional action and unilaterally going to the press and to the Congress. And I discussed this with Lou Elizondo, and we both decided this was unacceptable to allow this situation to persist. And fortunately, I was able to obtain some of the videos that showed some of these objects and bring them to the Washington Post and the New York Times and Politico and interest the editors there in this story. I was also able to go back to my former colleagues in the U.S. Senate, the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, and interest them in the topic. And during the course of those conversations, I was also able to persuade them to ask for an unclassified report from the Pentagon on this topic after the New York Times story ran. Unfortunately, surprisingly, when that story ran, it didn't ignite a fire in Congress as I thought it might. I thought at that point, maybe my job's done, the information's out there, these committees will start holding hearings and investigate it. That didn't happen, unfortunately. So it required further involvement, and in fact, that's largely what I've been doing the last 5 years. So we've made, as you know, substantial progress, and what I'd like to talk about today is this question that I think we're all concerned with and intrigued by. Some people are frightened by, and it's obviously an ancient question, and we may live in our lifetimes now to get the answer to this question, amazingly. So this is the agenda. In order to get at this, it seems to me that the things that we need to consider are, is it reasonable to believe there are other civilizations out there? Is it reasonable to believe, if so, that they're close enough they could get here? What does the data we have show? Is it consistent with what we might expect if, in fact, another civilization were visiting our planet? And what is the impact likely to be if we find out and confirm that this is true? So, what do we know about these days, and this is changing rapidly because of the Webb telescope and other scientific instruments. What do we know about the prospect for intelligent life elsewhere? Well, as it turns out, in my view at least, in all probability, there's still a debate in the scientific community about whether the universe is infinite or not. If it is, we should expect an infinite number of alien civilizations. What we see as far back in time and as far out in space as we can look is the same pattern, the same kinds of solar systems, the same materials operating under the same scientific laws. There's nothing that we can see about our solar system as we compare it to the rest of what we see that makes our solar system unique or distinct or different. So recently, a number of astronomers have made estimates of how much life might we expect in our galaxy in the Milky Way. So they make some assumptions. How often does life, or how many Earth-like planets are there? Planets that are at the right distance, would have the right temperatures, have water. How often might life arise and survive long enough to become technologically advanced? When they run the numbers, we're looking at 100 billion solar systems. We now know that all stars have planets, and most planets have moons. So the number of habitats out there that are potentially viable is, pun intended, astronomical. Duncan Forgan, one recent paper concluded there are likely 360 to 10,000